Except me, because the last time I lost everybody.
Hey, this is Meg Riley in Minneapolis, where it is gorgeous and perfect gardening weather, and you're here for another episode of The VUU. Today we have one of my favorite people on the planet, Kay Montgomery, with us, and we'll get to her in just a minute, but meantime, let's have our regulars introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Joanne Fontaine Crawford in Austin, Texas.
Hi, everybody. Hank Purse in lovely Milton, Massachusetts.
Hi, everybody. This is Patrice Curtis. I'm in Washington, D.C., where we feel the humidity starting to rise.
Mike's.
Hi, I'm Tom Shade in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and perfect gardening weather here, and I have been digging and digging and digging.
I got to be in Tom Shade's yard last week. It's a pretty nice garden there, shade garden in the back. Hey, Patrice, when I lived in D.C., my exterminator said, it's like living in a hot dog's panting mouth.
Really? Okay.
That's how humid it got. It really was like living in a hot dog's panting mouth.
That sounds like one of those moments where you thought, I am in the South or very close to the South.
And I thought, I've never had an exterminator before.
Oh.
Like a regular exterminator. So, Joanna, let's start with the weather where you are.
Well, down here it is great weather for scuba diving. For some of us right outside our door. I'm in North Austin, and other than around the creeks, no major flooding here. Of course, down in Austin, lots of flooding. The worst of the damage was to the south of us in San Marcos, where Reverend Brian Ferguson and the Fellowship of San Marcos are. And they've had some, the church didn't have any damage, but some of the congregants did, but from everything we've heard, no lives lost among congregants. Of course, there have been lives lost very much in Wimberley because I can't remember what night it was, but I guess Saturday night you have the Blanco River, and at midnight, I mean, it just, with no warning, here came the rain and it started flooding, and some houses were washed right off of their foundations. So it's kind of serious around here, and of course in Houston also lots of flooding. I've been seeing some pictures from our colleague, the Reverend Angela Herrera. It kind of looks like her apartment is just, surrounded by a lake, that she has a moat around there. But the rain is
you just left Houston. Was your neighborhood from where you were before? Would you have been affected in Houston?
From what I've heard, there was wind damage and such, but kind of oddly, that was the one school district that did not cancel classes. So I'm guessing that they were a little safer than most people. And really, with all of the Texas cities, the problems are either if you're right on, a river or a lake, or if you're in the urban area, because with most of these, and Houston is definitely like this, and Austin as well, there's no real good place for the water to drain. It's just cement everywhere. So lot of businesses that went underwater with this.
So, Joanne, you don't have in parts of Florida, they seem to have these, I don't even know what they're called, but they're areas where you can't build anything by law, and that's kind of where the water collects when they have, I guess you don't have a system like that.
In Houston, what they, I would say over the past decade, what they really started doing, like with new neighborhoods, was building lakes that were actually, a place for the waters to go. And so out in the suburbs, it generally is not as bad, but, in the middle of the city, it's and in Houston's case, they call it the Bayou City for a reason.
So is it pretty much drained now? I mean, is it, people are recovering?
People are recovering, and the rains are starting again tonight. So pray for us.
Can I ask how how are the climate change deniers taking all this?
Oh, I don't know. I'm not really hanging around with those types right now, but you know, I'm sure that for them it's just, you know, this is just weather and this is how it works. Just like I saw a weather forecast that said that much of the country, including Texas, is going to be lower than average temperature for the summer, which again, that's going to fuel the people that say, you know, what are you talking about? There's no global warming. See, here's proof. But, you know, if you're paying attention to the scientists, this is exactly how it works. Now, it's not all bad. One of the things that we're celebrating is Texas has been, and especially Austin, has been in a drought since 2011. And here in Austin, we have our big lake is Lake Travis, and everyone has been checking every day. You know, there are websites that monitor the rising lake levels, so we have been celebrating that. And another completely not weather related thing, but I am just so happy about this. Y'all may have heard that this spring there were 23 pieces of anti-LGBT legislation that were put forth in the Texas legislature, and none of them have passed. The only thing that they did was late last night, in sort of a Hail Mary, they passed a non-binding resolution that I believe kind of says we don't like gay people. Okay, it doesn't say that. What it says is marriage is only between, you know, we affirm that marriage is between one man and one woman. Of course, this coming from some of our legislators who've been married about 5 times, but in any case, it does not look like they did any permanent harm, and most importantly, it looks like they were not able to enact anything that would affect what Texas does with the upcoming SCOTUS ruling.
So any signs of federal government invasion?
Yeah, I've been seeing all of those memes too, you know, about FEMA, and you know, I can completely understand the humor of those, and I understand the hypocrisy, but you know, I also want to say people think about it, because there's actual human beings down here who do not believe like that, and who now are looking at their homes and going, how am I going to rebuild? What am I going to do here? So, you know, temper the snark a little bit. Wait for the bot, you know, I won't say wait. I was going to say something. Wait. Just wait a couple of weeks.
When do we get to be snarky again?
Yeah, wait a couple of weeks. I was going to say wait till the body gets cold, and then I thought, ooh, that may be a little too close to home.
That's a little too close to home.
Hey, Joanne, I really, really like the fact that the Texas legislature had to pass a non-binding resolution that says one man, one woman.
Yeah.
Not even man and woman. Now we have to be specific.
Right. Yeah, we have to be very specific about the math, because you know,
the world is changing.
The world is changing.
Well, here, and can I say, here in Milton, it's lovely and sunny, and there's still like a 15-foot pile of 15-foot high pile of snow still melting from the winter, and I mean, you know, and it takes over a whole like parking lot where in the you know, where they do keep all the town's construction stuff, and it's just this horrible, ugly, because they scooped up everything with it. So that's what's going on there. But it's also
taking bets on it when it's going to melt.
Oh, there's bets. There's, you know, I'm actually going to go down and see if I can get my photo taken with it. You know, and
I think it should be up on hot stove.
Exactly right. Instead of a selfie, it'll be like a sludgy, because it's all gross. You know, and it's also graduation season today. It's Harvard's graduation, which is really sort of like the last of all the colleges to graduate their kids. And so, you know, a whole bunch of folks graduating from HDS today, and as Andover Newton graduated 2 weeks ago, and all the other seminaries in the area have been doing theirs. So it's a big time of excitement, and excitement for folks who aren't in college, because now we'll have places to park again. It's this like 2-month period when you can actually park in town, and it's great. And you also you know everybody. It's great, you know. So
I remember that when I lived in Boston. In D.C., it's like that when Congress is out of session in the summer. All of a sudden, you can park. It's mellow, right, Patrice? I mean, I just remember how much I
It's
love.
mostly in August.
Yeah,
July, we
August is
have
the
all the
best.
tourists come in, and then in August, it gets really peaceful and quiet, like you're saying. Yeah, it's really lovely.
Well, July, the tourists are out there sweating on
I'll
the
be gone by
mall.
then, but
So, Patrice, when do you move to Florida?
sometime in August. Yeah,
Speaking of hot and humid,
yeah, exactly. But you know, there's a difference. What I'd say is that when I've lived places that are super hot, because I lived in Africa where it was 120 and 80 degrees in the winter, and you actually wanted a blanket, 80 degrees, right? Because your body just adjusts. You know, if the whole place is set up for hot, then it actually works out pretty good. You know, so I found it. You know, you can be cool. You can go from place to place, and it's very comfortable. And there's, you know, tree cover in places. So I don't know. And I just know that my body will adjust, and then it'll be great. The first year might be really hard, but
That's fabulous. I would rather be in Minnesota than Florida weather-wise, because you can always put on more clothes, but there's a limit to how many you can take off, you know. So
nah.
you'll enjoy it.
Yeah.
And Nancy likes it too. She doesn't mind the heat.
You know, the humidity is not, you know, sort of her favorite thing. But she was the one that pointed me to even look at Florida. So it's a really
So
interesting
you'll be
story.
saying that to her when she complains.
Yeah, it wasn't.
A cheer for our partners.
Yeah, you know, I basically said, sweetie, you've been so wonderful these last several years, you know, Joanne, you know, putting you through and supporting, you can't do it on your own. And I said, tell me where you would live, where you would never live, where you really would like to live. And she had a really good reason for choosing Florida. Had to do with spiritual practice and stuff, so. And it turned out great. I mean, I looked and I was like, are you kidding me? This is one of those magical moments where I might not have clicked on that congregational profile. And then when I did and read it, and I thought, wow. So the world, this is one of the great things. I think this is just one of the great things about living, right? It's those magical moments that happen that you can never predict. And if we can just, if we're awake to them, we can go, wow, that was really cool. That was one of those really cool moments.
Amen to that. Well, speaking of really cool moments, we will have some today with our guest. Kay Montgomery was Executive Vice President at the UUA for a really long time.
A really long time.
I bet she's seen a lot of magical and non-magical moments.
And now she hasn't been for a few years. And in that few years, one of the first things that she did was to edit an anthology. And so, Kay, tell us about the book. I know you have it.
I do have it.
And how you happened to decide to write that particular book or edit that particular anthology, and what it was like to do it.
And why her name says Lorraine instead of Kay.
Yeah, good question. I'll tell that actually is in some ways more interesting, is that I was so afraid that I would do the VUU and something technically would go wrong and I would have a nervous breakdown at home all by myself. So I came into the CLF offices to do it. So thanks to Lorraine, who has now saved me twice. So, all right, let's see if you can see this. It makes me feel like Vanna White to do it. This is the book. It's called Landscapes of Aging and Spirituality. Maybe somebody knows what these quite beautiful but unidentified to me things are on the cover. Tom, do you know? You've seen this book because you're in it. What are those
Tom
things?
is one of the authors here with us.
I think that's just rocks and a little pool of water.
Yeah, very pretty.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the reason I did this is that I was newly retired, and one of the things that I've discovered is that people who retire typically not only think about what to do in retirement, but also admit to themselves that they're getting older. And so I was having a lot of conversations with friends about aging and how they felt about it and was it good or bad and how they were going to do it. And Skinner House, the UUA's publishing house, put out a request for proposals about a book about aging, and I thought, well, in my ideal world, what would that look like? So I sent them a proposal, they accepted it, and I just got on the phone and called both friends and people I barely knew. Tom would fall into that category, and asked them if they would write an essay about aging, being as open as they were willing to be. And that varied a lot from person to person. But I was just blown away by the strength of the essays that came in. The contributors range from about 65 to late 80s, and none of them wrote the same essay. I mean, not even the same topically. And so it was totally fun to do. It was the perfect way for me to enter into this new phase of my life. And as far as I can tell, people are loving it. I just ran across Rose Hannig in the UUA bookstore, and she said it was selling like crazy, which is nice to hear. So I don't know whether any of
We're all
you
going to be
online
rich.
have seen it. Tom, you've read it, I assume.
I've read most of it. I haven't read everything. There's some great essays in here. I was particularly touched by Bill Sinkford's. I thought that was the most astonishingly kind of honest talk about one's body that I had read in quite a while. I thought it was wonderful.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. Almost everybody who has talked to me about the book has said how blown away they were by how straightforward Bill was about his physical issues. And one of the things that's always interested me about Bill Sinkford is he's so private. You know, this is not somebody who, you know, kind of leads with ego. And yet I've seen him several times now do just amazing self-revelatory things, and this is certainly one of them.
That essay was in the UU World, I think, so people who haven't seen the book get a taste of it with that. Yeah. I have read the book, and I think, as you say, each essay is so different, and they're all really interesting for somebody kind of looking ahead, looking for role models. I found it extremely useful. Patrice, you were waving around an electronic copy of the book?
Yeah, I got it on my tablet, and you know, I read Bill's essay first off in the UU World, and then when I realized that it was part of this collection, I went and bought the book. And yeah, I mean, Kay has really captured Bill. I served with him as his ministerial intern, and he has this sort of deep dignity about this particular issue, and you know, as his colleague, you know, you can think you have some idea about what that must feel, right, for him to struggle with that, and to be, you know, in the scooter during GA, and his willingness to be so vulnerable about, you know, what that feels like for him from the inside was revelatory and a gift to all of us.
Yeah.
I think everyone who has contributed to this book has given us a gift. It is a time of life that we continue to, I think, not do as well and celebrate as well as we could. In all of its perspectives, all of the challenges and the beauty and the wisdom that comes, it's just an area I wish that we were better balanced and not always looking to young people to lead us and young people to do this and that. But I've always felt that way.
Well, and since so many of such a large stretch of the population, the baby boomers, are moving into this age, I think that makes it a particularly lively thing for right now, and especially in our congregations. One of the things that interested me about putting these pieces together is that one of the older contributors, John Cummins, who was 88 when he wrote his essay, so he must be 90 now or close to it. I called him, and I didn't even know if he was still writing. And he said, well, yeah, I write, and yeah, I guess I'd give it a stab. And by the way, I don't use a computer. And I said, you send it to me any way you want. Send it in pencil if you want. And I thought, well, we'll see if he does that. He's 90, and I know he walks 2 miles every day, but he's 90. And so 4 days later, I got this impeccable essay from him, and I thought, boy, that's the way I want to age. I think I want to grow up to be John Cummins.
You know, he's amazing. I've been over to see him. He lives in a nursing home now, and he refers to his room as Thoreau's cabin. And he has this electric typewriter that First Universalist Church of Minneapolis gave him when he retired, and he writes on it every day. That's his spiritual practice. And he really is, you know, I actually just did a Quest piece on this, so it's really fresh in my mind. The Hindus have 4 stages of life, and 2 of them are for post-householder age. But I don't really feel like this culture has those kind of roadmaps that lend the kind of dignity that Patrice is talking about. I do wonder if baby boomers aging is going to change that, because I just went to a movie the other night. I forget the name of it, but Blythe Danner is in it, and she's the 72-year-old.
Avengers? Is it Age of
No,
Ultron?
it was not the Avengers. I forget the name, but when my friend and I got out of the car, and we were joking that it looked like a senior citizens bus tour had just let out, because there was this huge line of gray-haired people in front of the theater, and all going. This movie was packed. There was not an empty seat in the house, and which is really unusual at a movie on a Thursday night. And it was good. It was a good movie. But I thought, I wonder, now that baby boomers are aging and we seem so interested in ourselves, if there will be a lot more movies about aging, because this one was really quite a good story, I thought, and reflective. I mean, so you could be on the cusp of something. You could
there you go.
Well,
you know, there are a bunch of movies about aging. You know, Judi Dench is in one after another. There are fabulous actors and actresses who are doing movies about aging, and I say Judi Dench because every woman I know of my age wants to look like Judi Dench. But there you go. Some people are able to do that. I don't happen to be one of them. But it is interesting that I think there is an opening for talking about something we've mostly avoided talking about. I had an interesting day yesterday in that I talked to 3 friends, close friends, all of whom have just learned new facts about their physical body as they age. Actually, one of them is younger than I am. 2 of them are considerably older. But I thought, you know, this is the conversation that is going to start happening all the time, because there are so many people moving into that stage of life. And so the question is, how do you deal with the inevitable changes that come along with aging and still keep a hold of yourself, still have a deep spiritual life, still enjoy the world, still find things to celebrate? And I think that's the tension.
It seems like there's some marvelous opportunities here for churches, and one of the things that you mentioned, Kay, was about looking at someone and seeing someone as a role model for aging. And you know, churches where we get to have this deliberately multi-age experience, and where you get to see multiple people aging in different ways and kind of learn from that. Do you have any thoughts about things that churches and congregations should be doing, you know, for their elder members? You know, that we have this kind of stereotypical image of the person who can't use technology, and you know, and I'm finding that it's really not true. You know, for some people it is, but for a lot of people it is not.
Right. Well, technology, I do think, is something that complicates that. When I was the most active in a brick and mortar church was when I was in my 30s, and the people who I have remained closest to from that era were all much older than I was. I mean, they really kind of took me under their wing, taught me how to act in the world, mentored me, and insisted that I take on some tasks that I never would have left to my own devices. So I think there is a really big opening. I know that Skinner House is working with the UUA's Lifespan Faith Development people to do a discussion guide about this book. And I think that providing a container for people who, whatever age they are are dealing with aging is a really important and a very good thing for churches to do, because otherwise people sit at home and think, what does it mean that I didn't remember what I was supposed to do this afternoon, or oh my God, my hip hurts, and is it going to get worse? And so there are a whole bunch of things that I think churches providing a container for those conversations would be a real gift to people who are aging.
I just had
I also wanted just to follow on with that. What about for ministers in serving folks that are aging? Because that is something that I'd be very interested in seeing.
Well, I don't know. I'd be interested. Those of you who have been parish ministers, I'd be interested in knowing what you think. I'm reminded that several years ago I was preaching in the Belmont, Massachusetts church, and the minister came up to me afterward and said, there's somebody I'd like for you to meet. And there was this absolutely charming woman who had grown up in, I think, Austria, and very beautiful and very charming, and we had a delightful conversation, and the minister wandered back into the conversation and said, Kay, would you like to know how old, I can't remember her name, so-and-so is? And I said, sure. And she said, well, I'm 105. And it turned out that she drives the elderly to the church on Sunday morning. And she and the minister had worked out this way of her doing this ministry, which, God bless her, she was able to do. But I'm very curious about those of you who have done parish ministry and what your experience has been about dealing with the aging.
Well, I just had a conversation last week with Rosemary Lloyd, who is one of our colleagues, Reverend Rosemary Lloyd, and she, right now she's not serving a congregation. She's working at it's called she's a consult to the Conversation Project, developing strategy for promoting end-of-life conversations among clergy and congregations. So now, of course, this is end of life, and just because you're getting old, doesn't mean that that's it. But and one of the things that she's going to do, and that they are presenting, is for I guess, and I believe she's doing a workshop at GA, is that November is a time to help congregations and individuals learn how to talk about these things. And I guess their program for November is called Talking Turkey, so that at Thanksgiving dinner you can sit down with your family and sort of say, this is what I want. This is what I'd like to have happen. These, and all that sort of stuff. So there are some folks doing that. Yeah, and so
promoting that for Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah, sure, why not?
People are mad at gay people for coming out at Thanksgiving. That sounds like a much harder conversation.
We'll blame it on the gays. But it's but I think it is an opportunity for folks to start talking about this, and and also. I know at the church I'm serving right now, they also want to start talking to people about bequests, and so all these sort of things. I think there's a tie-in there about being able to support the institutions that have been there for us, and will go on after us. So I'm looking forward to that, and I said sign me up, send me some stuff. So I'm looking for Rosemary to do all that for us.
Well, I want to say one thing about the aging parishioners from the point of view of a minister, and that is there was a wonderful essay in the New Yorker a couple years ago by the poet Donald Hall, and he's now in a wheelchair and he's aging. I don't know, he must be in his 80s, and he's totally alert, and he talked about at one point being taken to a museum by his aide, close friend and aide, and the museum guard trying to be helpful, treating him like a very slow 5-year-old.
Right.
And so that's, I think, one of the things that happens certainly in the culture at large, and I'll bet in some of our churches, about aging. I mean, so the guard came up to him after he was there because he was being given an honor at the Kennedy Center. And the guard came up to him after he had had lunch at the museum and said, stooped down to his wheelchair and said, so did we like our din-din? And so you can just imagine what it's like to be Donald Hall and have someone doing baby talk to you. And that's an extreme example, but I do think that there's a modeling that can happen in our churches about respect for the person who's still there.
I do that every Sunday. That's maybe I should stop that. Okay.
Well, but you can do it to me.
Now, one of the things about the aging is, and the being administering to folks is that even more than in the rest of life, you really have to be perceptive about what people's capabilities are.
Right.
And because they widely vary. There are people who are in their 80s who are cognitively impaired, and the question of like, how was your dinner,
Might be appropriate.
Other people who are like, physically impaired but mentally sharp. People who have lost interest in, so much of our church is built around running the church. That's like our main activity that we offer people is they get to help run the church. And, for many people, once they retire, they've lost interest in that. I have, our annual meeting is next Sunday, and I'm not going. Right? It's like
good illustration.
Right? I'm willing to do a lot of things in the church. I'm willing to sing in the choir, but I'm not willing to sit through another annual meeting. And so that ability to actually perceive where people are, not stereotype their abilities or their interests, is really this key skill that a minister needs to it. And also to think a lot about we do need to move. This is my little personal crusade. We do need to move baby boomers out of the institutional leadership of the church, of our churches. And to find a new role for them as role models, as spiritual leaders, as wisdom sources, as all kinds of things.
Mentors,
but mentors, not as the chair of this committee and the chair of that committee, because that's just going to make our churches stagnate. We need younger leaders, active leaders doing things. So.
Well, I'm
that's
not going to touch.
That's my excuse, at least, for never wanting to be on any more committees. But that's.
Yeah, I'm not going to touch that one with a 10-foot pole. Although I can brag on Live Oak and say I really don't have to. They before I got here, that was one of the things that was so attractive, is that they really have this wonderful age mix on the board and on everything. But one thing that I've seen is, how do we do this thing that you're talking about, Tom, of making a place of value for people who are not serving the church in a leadership position anymore. How do we, get to that great wisdom? And I say that with all sincerity, because I got to see it when I was candidating last year. And I'd go to all the other groups and I'd say, okay, look, now is the time to ask me the hard questions. And they'd say, absolutely. What's your favorite color? But then I met at this church, they have a group called the Wisdom Circle, which is, the elders of the church. Man, they did not need any such invitation. One woman who I now completely adore, Georgia Weber, came with 4 pages of typewritten questions, and they were hard and they were wonderful. And so often, I think that there is something about not, how do you pronounce the word, infantilizing someone. Also, not falling into the trap of, oh, these are the holy people. No, these are people who are also, they're humans who are struggling with things and just like the rest of us. And yet there is something to lived experience and being able to respect that and listen to that.
I think the other piece of that also is that there are some elders who still want to be active or part of running the church or innovative. There's this way, I think one of the things that really sticks in my craw is how we talk about elders as if they no longer have the capacity to be innovative. Just because they've been in a system a long time, I don't think, or have lived a full life, I don't think that that means that they no longer have fresh ideas. So I don't know. I think that's the thing that bugs me the most. And maybe it's because I'm coming from the Bay Area, and it's, people don't look at folks and say, oh, well, you're a certain age, so therefore you must no longer have any, fresh ideas or new ways of looking at things.
People don't do that in the Bay Area?
That's not been my experience. I mean, it's possible, but there are lots of folks who have, I don't know, shall we say, gray hair in Silicon Valley who are, right there, either at the cutting edge or they are funding the cutting edge. I mean, they get the cutting edge. They get, oh yeah, this is really cool. This is a cool. I don't know. I think that there's some balance, some way of letting people. I think Tom has got it right. You just have to. It's almost like it has to be almost person by person.
Yeah, I think that I am less. That I think further outside the box now after I've left the ministry and retired than I did before. Partly because I'm less encumbered by the practicalities of institutional leadership. That I'm able to look at things with a little bit broader perspective, a little bit more historical thing, and a little less concern about what so and so going to think about. What so and so, I'm balancing all this.
You don't have to worry someone's going to fire you. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I'm never worried about that.
Maybe you have a little more time to think.
Right? Well, yeah, having a little time to think is like a really good thing. Now, if it is good to be able to remember what you thought, but
Well, okay, back to the book for a minute. I'm curious if there were any big surprises for you in it. Were there essays that made you say, I never would have even thought of that?
Are you talking to me, Meg?
Yeah, back to the book.
Yeah. No, actually. I mean, one of the things that interested me as the essays started coming in is that although some of them describe circumstances very different than my own, is that I found something to relate to in absolutely every single one of them. So no, there weren't, there were big surprises in terms of what people had on their minds and what they chose to write about. But in terms of a revelation or opening up something new, no, I say in the preface that what I was looking for was companionship as opposed to advice. And that was what it felt like to me, is that I was sitting around with a group of really great people having really frank conversations about what this period of life means to you. So no surprises, but really, really good companionship.
And do you think it would have been a different book if it hadn't been so many ministers writing about aging? I mean, that's pretty much who it was, right?
I was nervous about that, and the reality is that most of my friends are ministers, so that was who I knew, and that was actually who I wanted to have this conversation with. I don't, actually. Now that I've talked with a number of people about it, both ministers and lay people, no, I think aging isn't particularly tied into what you do with their lives. I'll tell you one of the interesting things about writing, about getting essays from ministers, is that ministers are used to writing sermons, and they also know that those sermons can't be too self-referential. And so, not for everybody, but for some people, it was hard to convince them that I was a really, really good word to use in a personal essay. So that was just kind of interesting for me in terms of the habits of a lifetime. But no, I don't think they would have been very different. I know, aging is a funny thing. I know when I turned about 50, I started believing I was going to get older. So I made different choices about money, about any number of things than I was willing to even think about before I was 50. And then when I turned 70, I kind of came to the realization that I was going to die, which ought not to be a revelation, but I think it is for a lot of people. And so there is something about that cusp of life where suddenly you think, this actually is going to end. And what do I want to do with what's left of it? And I think that's a really important and big conversation. Some people are so spiritually mature, they know that when they're 25, but I don't think very many people do.
Well, there's knowing and there's knowing, right?
Yes.
Right.
Well, I think there's a kind of I mean, I think that the wisdom that we have at different ages is all true wisdom. That there is a wisdom of the 25-year-old who has, you know, a long time ahead of them and is in a kind of there's a wisdom of all that possibility, and
Right.
there's you know, and there's a wisdom of 75. That's a different kind of wisdom, but it's no less true. No less true. Most of the, you know, people understand reality most of the way through their lives. You know.
Well, one of the essays that interested me in the book was the one done by Carl Scoville, who also was one of the older writers. And Carl is very, very Christian. Certainly, in our tradition, he would be at the far end of that spectrum. But but I loved his essay, and one of the things I loved about it is that he was so clear that he was old and he was getting older and he was going to die, and he knew how he wanted to do that. He didn't know what his choices would be, but he talks about his memorial service and what he wants that to be like. And there was something so fresh and so appealing about his being open about that.
What I thought was just astonishing about his essay was that the realism that he had about death and dignity, that he did not expect to have a death with dignity, that
Right.
death is often an undignified and messy
Right.
and unpleasant process. And I thought that was such a contrast to a lot of thinking that says that if we plan, control, take care of
Right.
things, do all this stuff right, we can have a death with dignity.
Absolutely.
And as that becomes the goal of our life, is to have this this death, and you know, it just may not happen. You know, it just may not
Right.
happen. It could be really messy. It could be ugly. It could be, you know, and that doesn't, you know, I mean, there's no particularly better way or worse way to do this.
Yeah, I'm with you. I found it incredibly refreshing that he said that out loud. I mean, no matter how much you take care of your health, no matter how much money you save, no matter how much you love your friends and family, you know, this might be outside your control. And making peace with that, I think, is a big deal.
Kay, so on this whole topic of aging and spirituality, do you have any thoughts about worship and worship services? And are there particular topics or ways of doing worship that you think that ministers should be thinking about in terms of the elders in their congregation?
Not off the top of my head. I will speak for myself. That is that, you know, people go to church for a wide variety of reasons, and I go to church for the sermon. Not everybody does, but I do. And what I want out of that sermon is a conversation, not with the person preaching, but I want for it to open up a conversation inside me. And I think that that's always been true of me, but I think the older I get, the more true that is that I'm actually looking for fodder about things to think about how to live. Because when you're young, you may not, but you might have decades ahead of you. But the older you get, the narrower that time gets, and the more important it is to think about how you do it, you know, who you're going to be in that, and whatever you have left to you.
It's interesting because I go to church now, not so much for the sermon, but for the songs.
Yeah, a lot of people do.
You know, because it gives me a way to participate in the world that I may not have otherwise. You know, we sing a lot of rousing songs in our church, and sometimes that's all that I'm able to do for justice in the week is sing that song and clap my hands and sway, you know. But I'm still part of that great struggle. I'm still part of that. And even when we sing our, you know, somewhat self-referential, proud songs about the liberal tradition, you know, kind of the ones in the hymnal that, you know, as we march along, brave, buoyant, and strong, you know, whatever it does.
I do.
That makes me feel like I'm still, that I am a part of that, and I'm a part of those band of pilgrims marching along. And that's really important, because the sense of becoming disconnected is one of the things that I fear in aging, that I'm going to become disconnected and privatized. And part of that's, you know, one of the reasons why my health is important, because I don't want to end up at home alone.
Yeah.
And so, you know, worship as that collective experience of being part of a larger movement. I mean, you know, these days I used to kind of rebel against the notion that Unitarian Universalism was a movement, right? Now, after I've retired and left the ministry, it appeals to me more, because it means that there's a place for me.
There isn't, Tom. I'm sorry. We're actually, this is an intervention, and Gail's asked us to talk to you.
Could I please become a Methodist, right?
And Tom, I would like to say, on a serious and grateful note, that was really eloquent and beautiful what you just said, and it gave me some new insight. So, thank you.
You're welcome.
It actually led to a very rare moment of silence on the VUU. That might be the first time that's ever come to us.
Yeah, that was a profound, really reflective silence, yeah.
Well, I thought both of your statements, I mean, I'm sure everybody of all ages is on a wide spectrum about why come to worship. And what I think, and I guess I'm looking at just retired people, you know, people like Tom. What I see, because I'm an organizer, is that to me, young adults and freshly retired people have the most capacity of any age groups to actually change the world, because they have time and because they are awake and paying attention at those two ages. You know, whereas as the, you know, in the Hindu stage is the householder stage, which is where people spend, you know, our time buying things and taking care of a house and kids and all that, are just running around trying to keep the wheels spinning. And so I've really thought a lot about how we could harness the wisdom. I look at some of the people retiring at First Universalist, where I sit, or within CLF, amazing people, just amazing people with gifts that haven't gone away, you know, just because they're sick of running an organization or doing whatever they do. And, you know, I wonder, because I get what you're saying, Tom, about, like, that's enough of that. It's not that I want to retire and run a different organization, but how can all of that wisdom be harnessed? That's, you know, and a number of people, I mean, I'm not for taking baby boomers out of leadership, because I think there's some great baby boomer leadership in terms of social justice work. It's when it's kind of the people who have always done it and always done it and always done it keep doing it, to me, that it stagnates. But I think retirement can bring a lot of fresh energy for people who finally have time to pay attention to what they've wanted to pay attention to, but we're too busy working.
You know, I spend a lot of time talking to the newly retired. I belong to a group of newly retired people, and we meet once a month to talk about various things that come up. But one of the things that I'm conscious of is that, and Lorraine Dennis at CLF and I were just talking about her upcoming retirement. One of the things that I'm conscious of and that I've heard over and over again is people retire and they're really ready to retire. It's fine with them. They want to do that. They're looking forward to it. But then they retire and like there's something that they can't quite work out. And what that something, not always, but often is there's this thing I'm really good at. I don't want to go back to work, but I want to use what my gifts are. I want to use what I'm good at. And sorting out how to do that in retirement is a whole different stage of life than what do I want to do as a profession that will use that. And sometimes those skills are highly developed, and it takes a certain amount of imagination to figure out how to do them, not as a job, but as one of the things you bring to your way of being in the world at this point.
Right. That's something that I've seen here, which is we have people who have retired, and now they're really getting into church for the first time because now they have the time to. And it's been really interesting seeing some people make the choice, kind of like what you're talking about, which is I had this skill in my professional world, and now I would like to continue doing that, but in another way. But I also have some really dynamic folks in the church who made the decision of, you know what, I did all of this analytical work in my job. And now at church, what I want to do is I want to get on and chair the pastoral care team, and I want to do some work with a homeless shelter because and it's a spirituality thing, right? It's you know, I want to nurture this part of myself that I haven't had time to before. So I will be the last person saying, you know, boomers retire from your church positions. Frankly, if they did, our church would just, you know, kind of crater.
Yeah. To give an example, though, of people trying to figure out what to do when they retire, I had lunch last week with somebody some of you either know or know of, Dick Scobie, who was the head of the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee for many, many years. And what he retired 17 years ago, but one of the things that he's doing in retirement is watercoloring. And he paints almost every day. And this is something he wanted to do all along. He was a social activist. He was running this big agency. And so that's kind of a charming idea, isn't it? Is that finally you get to create watercolors.
I'm tempted toward that all the time. And part of it is, you know, I joke with my wife about the year that I decided to stop doing all that I'm doing now. And just paint watercolors. But part of that attraction is the idea of doing something that you didn't need 5 other people to agree with you to do it.
Good point.
There was a T-shirt we saw at the Toledo Art Museum last week that said, I almost bought it for my wife, it said, when will I have been here long enough that I can do something without getting 14 to 20 other people to approve of it? You know, and you know, the years of ministry, where you got to think up all kinds of great ideas and then take them to a whole, you know, group of people who may or may not think that they're good ideas and may or may not want to implement them, and may decide to implement them and then not actually do it. I mean, all of that, to leave that behind, that was one of the gifts.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the essays I particularly liked was Kate Tucker, who is a friend of mine, so of course but you know, I've been close to her as she's retired and watched her just try things, and she's used that William Stafford poem about the red thread, don't let go of the thread, and really just allowed herself to go so many different places. It's been fascinating to watch, and now I think she's 3 years into it, and she's like, okay, now it's time to get serious about what I'm going to do next. You know, I don't know what it'll be. You know, so far she's drawn chickens, and she's just done things you never would think somebody would do. But Kay, is that your feeling? I mean, you've really stayed. You're going to be president of the Meadville board, for goodness sake. You've kept using your gifts that you use professionally, and is that the main way that you're doing that?
I actually don't have a lot of other gifts. So yes, who knows what's going to bring? I mean, that's not what I started off to do. That was not what I imagined, and you know, some things have just kind of fallen in my lap. So one of the fun things about not having a job where somebody else decides what you do and what you don't do is that I figure I'm just kind of walking through this space and I'm wide open to things that come along, and some of them are going to fit and some of them aren't, and the ones that aren't, I don't have to do, which is quite appealing.
That is appealing, and I should correct myself. Lee Barker would be upset if you became president of Meadville, but you will be chair of the board.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
He would not only be upset, he would be astonished.
He would be astonished and out of a job. So, yeah, exactly. So, but for you, that doesn't feel like you're back at work when you do that. It feels like you're doing it from a different place.
And the day that something comes to feel like I'm back at work, I'll stop doing it. I mean, I loved my job. I mean, I just loved it. But you know what? I haven't missed it. I like being in this new phase, and I'm going to like it as long as I can. Tom's essay, to go back to Tom's essay is, of the essays in the book, is the most rewarding, I think, in terms of figuring out how to be. And Tom, can you sum that up into one sentence? I know we only have a few minutes left, but I thought that was really useful, even for people who are much further along on this journey than you are in terms of age. Can you give us a 2-sentence summary of your potato chip essay?
I guess the thing that I had come to was that that I had reached all of my major goals in life, and that at this point in time, while I'm hungry for more, the more will not make me any happier than I am right now. And I think about it in terms of grandchildren, right? When I wrote the essay, I had 1 grandchild. Now I have 3. I would love to have 10, but the 10 wouldn't make me any happier than the 3 that I have now. Right. And I've met all my professional goals. I got to be the minister of an exemplary Unitarian Universalist church. I have been involved in struggles all my life, social justice struggles. I know that I'm not going to, when I finally check out, the world is still going to be an unjust place. And but I have done, what I have considered, my work in that, and so I won't die with that on a regret list. And so that was basically it, is that if you can look at your life and you say, well, I really, aside from some mistakes, I really don't regret missing anything that I wanted to do, and I'm happy, then that's a good place to be. And
tell us about the potato chips.
Well, life's good experiences are like eating potato chips. They're delicious, but they're not ultimately satisfying, in the sense that you could always get more. If I had 10 grandchildren, I'd probably want 20. If I live another 5 years, 10 years, 15 years with my wife, I will want more time, but it won't make me any happier than what I have now. There's a difference between being there's a difference between having still desiring and being happy. You can still desire, but you can be happy with what you have. And I had reached this point. I went through a little thing where I started thinking about dying, and then I kind of came to the conclusion, like, well, what more do I want? What more do I want? Well, I want everything more, but really, what more would make me happier? Right.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good way to live, regardless of what age you are.
Yeah.
Hard, not necessarily easy, but hard.
Put on your bucket list everything you've already done.
Yeah.
And then you can cross them off and go, hey.
So I wanted to ask Kay if she had any thought about, if you have any thought about doing a follow-on book like this that maybe reaches out to congregants and, maybe they talk about what it's like, how church serves or...
Yeah, that's interesting. No, I hadn't, but I think it's a really interesting thought. The only follow-up book that I have thought about, because I love poetry and I read poetry every day, was putting together a compilation of poems about aging, some of which have a lot of wisdom embedded in them. So but I think your idea actually is a really interesting one. I'll pass it along to the folks at Skinner House.
That's good.
Okay.
Oh.
And Meg disappeared. Meg disappeared. Well,
Maybe she's sick of us.
I guess so. I guess she was looking at the time and realizing that we have spent another, in this case, marvelous hour together. Kay Montgomery, thank you so much for coming on. And so when is your book available? Because I was sneaking over, and Amazon, it's not available yet.
Oh, I don't know about Amazon. I know that you can get it through the UUA bookstore right now. And
I saw it there last week.
I think it is available on Amazon. Well, at least the electronic version is, because I have it.
Okay, yeah. No, it was saying something about pre-order. So go to the UUA bookstore, get this terrific book. Are we going to see you at GAK?
No, you're not. But
You've done your time. You've done your time.
I've done.
There will be no book signings there. Thank you all for joining us, everyone.
I will sign Kay's book for her.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye, all.